The Anaheim Ducks are nowhere where they want to be when it comes to sitting in the Pacific Division the last few years, being one of the bottom teams, getting out of that Ryan Getzlaf and Corey Perry area and going into now what we call it the rookie stage, where you got Trevor Zegras, Troy Terry, and a bunch of other guys coming up in the system. But who is going to need to step up this season to make sure that the Anaheim Ducks can actually get out of the bottom of the Pacific and actually fight for a playoff spot? We got three players to name here today. Welcome back to Gillis TV. If you're new to the channel, like anything MLB or NHL related news, rumors, stuff like this, we got everything covered here on the channel. Now, like I said, the Anaheim Ducks are going to have a hard time pulling themselves out of the bottom five in the league, but it is entirely possible with some of their players they brought in and a bit of health. While the team won't be contending for a playoff spot this year, more than likely, there is room for certain members of the team to improve themselves this season and prove that they are worth Anaheim's time. They want to play in Anaheim. And of course, with all the young guys like Leo Carlson, just drafted this past offseason, it is going to take some time. And then, of course, the golden gold boy there in the World Juniors last year, 2 years ago, Mason McTavish. Anaheim does have a lot of potential. It just has to get there first, let these guys develop, and Anaheim will be out of that Ryan Getzlaf, Corey Perry, Kevin BX, all that stage, and then it will for sure be the young guys' turn here any year. Now, starting with number one, like I said, there's three players, and this one's a no-brainer. Trevor Zegras, who is a remarkable player, has some great hand-eye, has some, fantastic, ability to do, like, this really cool stuff on the ice. Trevor Zegras is getting into a holdout territory with the Ducks. All signs point to a bridge or a short-term deal, meaning the young centerman will have to prove he is worth the money he is wanting or expecting right now. There are now two potential franchise centermen right behind him, so he has that to think about as well. He put up solid numbers for the team he played on, but with Troy Terry re-upping so quickly, more pressure will be on Zegras the longer this drags out. So Trevor Zegras, like I said, he's a phenomenal hockey player. He just needs to prove himself, because he could be wanting up into the $8-10 million area, where Anaheim's like, hold on here, prove yourself, let's do a bridge deal. And you see that with a lot of players, i.e. like Evan Bouchard taking a bridge deal before his next contract, who is a promising defenseman for the Edmonton Oilers. You see that with the guys like the Zegrases, the Bouchards, who, hey, we know you want this money. We think you're worth this money, but you need to prove to us that it's going to be a constant basis that you actually deserve this money, that we're not going to pull a New York Islanders, sign Rick DiPietro to a bunch of money, and then, all that happened, and so on. And the Islanders are still paying him, I think it's $1.5 million every July 1st. That is why teams do a lot of these bridge deals, also with the salary cap. And make sure you actually earn that money, because you can have a phenomenal first 3 years in the NHL, and then it can go crashing down. A lot of players do that, and teams get stunned by that. That's why a lot of teams go with the bridge deals. Now, a guy they just recently signed to help bolster their defense a bit is Radko Gudas, who ultimately said he doesn't want to play in Canada due to the media. Thanks, Toronto media, for that. But Radko Gudas played his role in Florida very well, especially on that game-winning goal for Florida, where he drove the net, screened the goalie, and they scored in that game. I believe that was the final game. I don't watch too much Eastern Conference playoffs, but I believe that was the goal that Toronto was like, oh, that's interference, blah, 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 and you know how Toronto Maple Leafs fans are, no offense. But the role in Florida for Radko Gudas was a third-pairing defenseman, physical defenseman playing, 14 to 18 minutes a night. Not second-line minutes, but a guy that could go out there, block the shot, kill the penalty, be physical on the star players, which, if you look at Florida's defense to the Anaheim Ducks, it is a totally different defensive situation where Anaheim, no offense, is weaker on the back end than Florida was when Radko Gudas was there. The Ducks are much weaker, like I said, on defense and have much less options. This will force Gudas into a second pairing role that may or may not do well in. He will face tougher competition each night, but the good thing is he's not expected to produce offensively. The players he will match up against will be more skilled, so he will have to adjust the play up to that speed and level. Like I said, Radko Gudas is a phenomenal third pairing defenseman. I am excited to actually see what he can do for the Anaheim Ducks on a second pairing, playing more minutes. Like it said, he's going to go up against tougher competition, but if you could pair him with that offensive guy that guy is the puck mover, he's the one that's going to be taking most of the shots from the point, the guy to get stuff done offensively, you could see a really phenomenal play by Radko Gudas having the D-man paired with him doing all that stuff and let Gudas focus on the physical aspects of the game and the defensive side. And that's what a lot of defensive tandems actually do well in, is if you have that offensive puck-moving defenseman with a defensive defenseman, that D pairing actually does a lot better than mixing anything else with a puck-moving defenseman or offensive defenseman. Now the third one. He's been kind of on the chatter about maybe wanting out. He's denied wanting out, and that's John Gibson. There were rumors that John Gibson didn't want to play with the Ducks anymore. Whether those were said at the time or not, he seems to be staying through the start of the season with the Anaheim Ducks and will be their starter again. I firmly believe that he still has elite talent, but has been held down by the rebuild of the Ducks. Which, when you don't have defense, we've seen, being an Oilers fan, I've seen that in the dark years. We had really bad defense, and it burned a lot of goalies. And the goalies we brought in, yeah, they weren't like John Gibson, but like Brizgalov back in the day, Habby Bulin back in the day. You look at the defense in front of them, I don't blame them for wanting out of Edmonton. I don't blame a lot of those goalies for not doing so well, because you look at the defense you put in front of them. I'm not just talking about defensemen. I'm talking about the forwards too. If they're not backtracking, if they're not taking their man in the slot, the centermans, if they're not watching the points, it can get nasty like no tomorrow. The team seems to be starting to turn things around and getting better, so he should expect to rise in his save percentage from the lowest in his career last season. Yeah, so like I said, adding a defensive defenseman like Radko Gudas could help John Gibson in that sense too. A physical guy that can block shots really well. And John Gibson is one of those guys where if you're a star player going through a rebuild, it's really tough on that star player. We've seen it for a lot of teams and whatnot. And you feel bad for these guys because you know they have so much potential, but the guys they're getting with them makes no sense for it. So we could possibly actually see that with Chicago and Connor Bedard. I know Taylor Hall is with Connor Bedard now, but like I said, being an Oilers fan, we saw the McDavid Hall effect. It did not work out, ultimately led to Taylor Hall being traded. Now, I'm not saying Connor Bedard's going to go that way, and this is kind of off topic, but that could be something too. So getting a team around John Gibson defensively should be kind of the Anaheim Ducks' next goal at either the trade deadline. And like I said, there is a possibility that they could push for a playoff spot, but I don't see it for another few years. But if these guys can step up, do their job well, it will accelerate that for sure. But that's it for me today. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Gillis TV. I'll catch you on the next one.